The owner of a bankrupt restaurant let an orphan girl live there while he was trying to sell it. But when he walked in unannounced, he was shocked to see what that little girl was capable of. Quick before the story starts. Where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Springfield Elementary's playground as children streamed through the front gates into waiting arms of parents. Laughter and excited chatter filled the air, a stark contrast to the small, solitary figure waiting on the side street, deliberately away from the main entrance. 10-year-old Sarah Bennett stood quietly against a maple tree, her worn backpack clutched tightly against her chest. Though her brown hair was slightly tangled and her clothes were visibly faded, there was an unmistakable sparkle in her hazel eyes that even hardship couldn't diminish. She watched other children leave with their parents, careful to avoid meeting anyone's gaze. The last thing she wanted was pity. Just one more day, she whispered to herself, running her fingers along the edges of the small, leather-bound notebook, tucked securely in her jacket pocket. The recipe book, her grandmother Martha's parting gift, was Sarah's most treasured possession, a tangible connection to happier times and the home they once had. Sarah had developed a careful routine since they'd lost their apartment 3 weeks ago. Wait until most students had left, take the back streets to avoid neighbors who might ask questions, and find somewhere relatively safe to spend the night. Tonight would be the park gazebo again, unless it rained. The forecast had mentioned scattered showers, and the thought made her stomach tighten with anxiety. "Sarah, are you waiting for someone?" The gentle voice startled her. Sarah looked up to find Miss Carter, the school's music teacher, standing nearby with concerned eyes. Emily Carter was young, perhaps in her early 30s, with kind features and a warmth that made even the shyest students comfortable around her. "I'm fine, Miss Carter," Sarah replied quickly. Too quickly. My ride is just running late." Emily tilted her head slightly, her expression revealing she wasn't convinced. She'd noticed Sarah wearing the same clothes several days in a row. The careful way the child rationed her lunch, the way she lingered after school rather than rushing home. "It's getting chilly," Emily said casually, pulling her cardigan closer. "Would you like to wait inside the music room? I need to organize some sheet music before I leave." Sarah hesitated, weighing her options. The temperature was dropping and the music room was always warm. Plus, Miss Carter never asked too many questions. "I guess that would be okay," she finally agreed, following the teacher back into the building. In the cozy confines of the music room, Sarah sat quietly at a desk while Emily shuffled papers at the piano. The silence between them was comfortable, but Emily couldn't ignore her growing concerns. "Sarah," she began carefully, "is everything all right at home?" The girl's fingers immediately found the recipe book in her pocket, clutching it like a talisman. "Everything's fine," she insisted, but her voice wavered. "You know, when I was about your age, I went through a really tough time too," Emily said, sitting down beside Sarah. "My dad lost his job and we had to stay with relatives for a while. It was embarrassing. I didn't want anyone to know." Something in the teacher's voice, the genuine understanding, cracked Sarah's carefully constructed facade. Tears welled in her eyes before she could stop them. "My grandma Martha is in the hospital," she finally admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "She got really sick, and all our money went to the doctors. Then we couldn't pay rent anymore." Emily's heart sank. "We? Who's taking care of you, Sarah?" The girl looked down at her worn sneakers. "No one right now. Grandma Martha is all I have. She's getting better, though," she added quickly, as if afraid Emily might not believe her. "She just needs more time." "Where have you been staying?" Emily asked gently, already dreading the answer. Sarah shrugged, trying to appear casual. "Different places. The park mostly. Sometimes the library until it closes." Emily fought to keep her expression neutral despite the shock and heartbreak churning inside her. A 10-year-old child sleeping in parks and scrounging for food, it was unimaginable. "Sarah, you can't continue living like this. There are people who can help." "No!" Sarah's reaction was immediate and fierce. "Please don't call social services. They'll take me away and Grandma Martha won't know where to find me when she gets better. Please, Miss Carter." The desperation in the child's voice was heartbreaking. Emily knew what she was supposed to do, report this immediately. But she also understood Sarah's fear of being lost in the system. "Let me think," Emily said, buying time. "Are you hungry? When's the last time you had a proper meal?" Sarah's hesitation was answer enough. "There's a place nearby, a little family restaurant called Thompson's. The owner sometimes provides meals for people in need," Emily explained. "Why don't we go there first? We can figure out the next steps after you've had something to eat." As they stepped outside into the gathering dusk, Sarah clutched her precious recipe book with one hand and tentatively took Emily's offered hand with the other. For the first time in weeks, she didn't feel completely alone. What neither of them could possibly know was that this simple act, a compassionate teacher taking a homeless child for a meal, would change not just Sarah's life, but the lives of everyone they were about to meet at Thompson's restaurant. Jack Thompson stood behind the counter of his once bustling family restaurant, wiping the same spot he'd been cleaning for the past 5 minutes. At 45, the stress lines on his face told a story of recent struggles. His serious expression couldn't completely mask the kindness in his eyes as he glanced at the clock, then at the empty tables that should have been filled with dinner customers. Thompson's restaurant had been a neighborhood fixture for decades. Jack had grown up in this very kitchen, learning everything from his parents, watching them transform simple ingredients into dishes that brought the community together. Now, those same walls witnessed his battle to keep their legacy alive. With practiced movements, Jack began portioning out the day's unsold food into containers. It wasn't good business sense, perhaps, but he couldn't bear throwing perfectly good meals away when people were going hungry just blocks away. The bell above the door jingled, startling him. It had been so long since a customer had entered that the sound seemed almost foreign. But it wasn't a paying customer. It was Emily Carter, the music teacher from the local elementary school, with a small, thin girl at her side. "Evening, Jack," Emily said with a warm smile. "I hope we're not intruding." "Never," Jack replied, his eyes moving to the child who stood partially hidden behind Emily. "The kitchen's closed for paying customers, but I've got plenty set aside." Sarah peered cautiously at the tall man. Despite his gruff appearance, something about him reminded her of her grandmother. Perhaps the way his hands moved with confidence as he prepared the food, or the slight furrow in his brow that spoke of concentration, rather than anger. "This is Sarah," Emily introduced. "Sarah, this is Mr. Thompson. He makes the best pot roast in Springfield." "It's just Jack," he corrected gently, setting 2 plates on the counter. "Come on over, Sarah. You look like you could use a good meal." Sarah approached hesitantly, drawn by the aroma of home-cooked food. When Jack placed a plate before her, golden mashed potatoes, tender roast with gravy, and buttered green beans, her eyes widened. "This looks like how my Grandma Martha makes it," she whispered, pulling out her small notebook and carefully opening it to a blank page. Jack noticed the motion. "What have you got there?" "My recipe book," Sarah answered, suddenly shy. "Grandma. And I write down recipes we like." As Sarah took her first bite, a genuine smile transformed her tired face. She chewed thoughtfully, then asked, "Do you use thyme in the gravy? And maybe a little bit of mustard powder?" Jack's eyebrows rose in surprise. "You've got quite the palate, young lady. Most adults couldn't pick that out." While Sarah ate, Emily quietly explained their situation to Jack: the hospitalized grandmother, the lost apartment, the child with nowhere to go. All their savings went to medical bills, Emily concluded, keeping her voice low. Martha was apparently a chef at Bellini's, downtown years ago before it closed. Jack's expression shifted. "Martha? Not Martha Kent?" Emily nodded. "I believe that's her last name. Sarah's full name is Sarah Bennett. Martha's her maternal grandmother." Jack leaned against the counter, momentarily lost in thought. "I met her once years ago. She was something of a legend in local restaurant circles." Their conversation was interrupted by Sarah's voice. "Why is your restaurant empty?" The food is so good. Jack smiled sadly. Times change, kid. People want fancy new places with exotic menus and flashy presentations. A simple family restaurant like this one. He gestured around the room. We're becoming a thing of the past. Sarah frowned, glancing around at the worn but clean tables. The faded photographs on the walls showing the restaurant in its heyday. But this feels like home, she said simply. Jack watched as the girl carefully wrote something in her notebook. Notes. About his food, he realized. Despite everything, she still found joy in this small ritual. Sometimes, Jack said quietly to Emily, the most important things get lost in the shuffle of progress. Little did he know how prophetic those words would prove to be, or how this chance encounter would soon change everything for all of them. The morning light filtered through Thompson's dusty windows as Jack stared at the small sign in his hands. 4 simple words, for sale, that represented the end of his family's legacy. His fingers traced the edges of the weathered frame, remembering how his father had hung the grand opening sign nearly 40 years ago. With a heavy sigh, Jack walked to the front window and placed the sign where it would be visible from the street. Each movement felt like a betrayal to his parents' memory, but the stack of unpaid bills on his desk left no alternative. 3 months behind on rent, suppliers threatening to cut him off. The numbers simply didn't add up anymore. As Jack stepped back to look at the sign, a small face pressed against the glass made him jump. Sarah's wide eyes stared at the sign, then at him, her expression changing from curiosity to dismay. Before he could react, she pushed open the door, the bell jingling, accusingly. You're selling the restaurant? Her voice was small but steady. But where will you make food for people who need it? Jack ran a hand through his graying hair. Sometimes adults have to make tough decisions, kid. Not enough customers means not enough money to keep the lights on. Sarah clutched her recipe book, knuckles white against the worn leather. But your food is so good, it's like a hug on a plate. Despite everything, Jack smiled at her description. Thanks, but good food isn't always enough these days. Sarah looked around the empty dining room, her analytical gaze taking in details most children would miss. She walked slowly around the space, touching the wooden tables, studying the old photographs, peering into the kitchen where Jack had fed her the night before. People don't know what they're missing, she declared finally, turning to face him with unexpected determination in her young eyes. My grandma Martha always said that to get people's attention, you have to give them something they can't find anywhere else. Jack folded his arms, intrigued despite himself by the child's earnestness. And what would that be, exactly? Sarah opened her recipe book, flipping through pages filled with handwritten notes in 2 distinct handwritings, one elegant and mature, the other childish, but careful. Stories. Grandma Martha said every great dish tells a story about the person who created it and the place it came from. She looked up at Jack with unflinching certainty. Your restaurant has stories, Mr. Thompson. I can feel them in the walls. Before Jack could respond, the door opened again as Emily entered, looking flustered. Sarah. I was worried when I couldn't find you at our meeting spot. She stopped when she noticed the sign in the window. Oh, Jack, I'm so sorry. Jack shrugged, trying to appear casual. It was inevitable. Been fighting a losing battle for months. Sarah looked between the adults, suddenly aware of a world of adult problems beyond her comprehension. But something inside her, perhaps her grandmother's stubborn spirit, refused to accept defeat. I can help, she announced, causing both adults to look at her in surprise. I know I'm just a kid, but Grandma Martha taught me things about food that even grown-ups don't know. There was such conviction in her voice that neither adult laughed. Instead, Jack knelt down to Sarah's level, meeting her gaze directly. And, what do you know about saving a failing restaurant, young lady? Sarah held out her recipe book, offering it like a sacred text. I know that when people forget what matters, sometimes they need a child to remind them. The rain tapped gently against the windows of Thompson's restaurant as Emily finished her passionate plea. Jack leaned against the counter, arms crossed, his expression unreadable as he considered her proposal. Let me get this straight, he said finally. You want me to let a 10-year-old homeless girl stay in my restaurant temporarily? Have you thought about the legal implications here? Emily stood her ground. I'm not suggesting anything permanent, Jack. But she can't keep sleeping in parks and under bridges. It's just until we locate her grandmother or find a better solution. Jack glanced toward the kitchen where Sarah was contentedly organizing spice jars, seemingly at home among the culinary tools. And what does Child Services have to say about this arrangement? He asked, though his voice had softened. Emily bit her lip. I haven't called them yet. Sarah is terrified of being put into the system and losing connection with her grandmother. Just give me a few days to explore options. Thunder rumbled outside, punctuating the gravity of the situation. Jack sighed deeply, running a hand through his hair. 2 days, he conceded reluctantly. She can use the small office upstairs, but Emily, we need a real plan. Later that evening, after Emily had left with promises to return with fresh clothes, for Sarah, Jack found himself sitting at a kitchen table with a peculiar child. The restaurant was closed, rain still drumming steadily outside, creating an unexpectedly intimate atmosphere. So, Jack began awkwardly, your grandmother taught you to cook? Sarah nodded, opening her precious notebook. Grandma Martha was the head chef at Bellini's downtown before it closed. She knows everything about food. Jack raised an eyebrow. Everything? Well, Sarah smiled. She says nobody knows everything about food. That's why it's magic. There's always something new to discover. As Sarah carefully turned the pages of her notebook, she explained how Martha had taught her about flavors, techniques, and the science behind cooking. She said recipes are like music. They have notes and rhythms and feelings. My father used to say something similar, Jack admitted, surprised to find himself sharing personal memories. He called cooking edible storytelling. Sarah's eyes lit up. That's exactly what Grandma says. She told me every spice in our cabinet has its own story about where it came from and the people who grew it. Jack found himself genuinely curious. And what was your favorite story? The one about saffron, Sarah replied without hesitation. How it takes thousands of flowers to make just 1 ounce and how people have to pick each tiny thread by hand. Grandma said when we use saffron, we should remember all the careful hands that touched it before ours. Something shifted in Jack's expression as he listened to this child speak with such reverence about cooking traditions. It reminded him of conversations with his own grandmother, long forgotten in the daily struggle to keep the business afloat. What about your grandmother? Sarah asked suddenly. Did she teach you to cook too? The question caught Jack off guard. She did, actually. She immigrated from Italy with nothing but her family recipes memorized. No written records. She believed true recipes live in your hands and heart, not on paper. Is that why you don't have a recipe book? Sarah asked, gesturing around the kitchen. Jack's laugh held a note of regret. I guess I thought I'd never forget. But over the years, focusing on keeping the doors open, some things get lost. Sarah regarded him solemnly, with wisdom beyond her years. Maybe that's why the customers stopped coming. They could taste that something was missing. Her words, innocent yet profound, struck Jack to his core. In the quiet of the rainy evening, surrounded by the familiar sense of his kitchen, he wondered if this strange, homeless child might understand something about his restaurant that he himself had forgotten. The sky above Springfield darkened, ominously as evening approached. What had begun as light rain quickly transformed into a ferocious storm, with lightning illuminating the city and harsh flashes and thunder rolling across the heavens with unforgiving force. Sarah huddled beneath a park pavilion, her small form shivering against the cold. The structure offered minimal protection as wind drove sheets of rain sideways through the open sides. She clutched her precious recipe book inside her jacket, trying to shield it from the elements. The notebook, her last tangible connection to Grandma Martha, could not get wet. The beam of a flashlight suddenly cut through the darkness, sweeping across the pavilion. Sarah's heart raced as she recognized the unmistakable uniforms of police officers approaching. Hey there. Anyone? Under here? A male voice called out, concerned rather than threatening. Sarah pressed herself deeper into the shadows. She'd heard stories from other homeless people about children being taken to shelters, separated from their families, lost in a system too large to care about individual circumstances. If that happened, how would Grandma Martha ever find her? When she recovered? The flashlight beam inched closer to her hiding spot. "I think I see someone," a female officer said, her voice gentler. "It's okay, we're just checking to make sure everyone's safe during the storm." Making a split-second decision, Sarah bolted from her hiding place, darting past the surprised officers and into the rain-soaked night. She ignored their calls to stop, running with the desperate energy only fear can provide. Rain pelted her face, mixing with tears she couldn't control. Her shoes squelched in growing puddles, her clothes becoming heavier with each passing minute as they absorbed the downpour. The wind cut through her like ice, but still she ran, instinctively heading toward the only place that had felt safe in recent days. 20 minutes later, Sarah stood before Thompson's restaurant, drenched and trembling violently. "Streets closed." Sign hung in the window, but a light still burned in the kitchen. With numb fingers, she knocked on the glass door, barely able to summon enough strength to make an audible sound. Inside, Jack was going through invoices, tallying the mounting debt that would soon force him to close permanently. The faint tapping initially registered as just another sound from the storm until something made him look up. The sight of the small, soaked figure outside sent him rushing to the door. "Sarah!" he exclaimed, pulling her inside. "Good God, you're soaked to the bone." Sarah stood dripping on the tile floor, teeth chattering uncontrollably. "Police in the P-Park," she managed to say. He didn't want to go to a shoe shelter. Jack quickly grabbed a clean tablecloth, wrapping it around her shaking shoulders. He guided her to the kitchen, cranking up the heat and setting water to boil for hot chocolate. "I'm sorry," Sarah whispered, guilt evident in her eyes. "I didn't know where else to go." Jack said nothing as he gently took the recipe book from her clutching fingers, carefully setting it aside to dry. His mind raced through options, weighing responsibilities against compassion, legalities against basic human decency. As he handed Sarah a steaming mug of cocoa, he watched her small hands wrap around it gratefully, seeking warmth. In that moment, something inside Jack Thompson, a hardened man who'd seen his life's work slowly crumbling, made a decision that would change everything. "Listen to me, Sarah," he said firmly but kindly, kneeling to meet her eyes. "From tonight, you stay here. We have a small apartment upstairs. Until we find your grandmother or figure something else out, you're not spending another night on the streets." Sarah looked up, disbelief and hope warring in her expression. "Really?" "Really," Jack confirmed, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. "Now drink your cocoa before it gets cold." For the first time since Grandma Martha had been hospitalized, Sarah felt the vice grip of fear around her heart begin to loosen. Jack woke with a start, disoriented by the piercing scream that cut through the night. For a confused moment, he forgot about his new houseguest until a second cry jolted him fully awake. He stumbled out of bed, following the sounds to the small room where Sarah slept. The girl was sitting upright, eyes wide open but unseeing, locked in the grip of a nightmare. Tears streamed down her face as she called out, "Grandma, don't leave me alone, please." "Sarah," Jack said softly, approaching carefully. "Sarah, wake up. You're safe." The child's eyes gradually focused on him, the terror slowly receding as reality replaced the horrors of her dream. She blinked several times, remembering where she was. "I'm sorry," she whispered, embarrassment replacing fear. "I didn't mean to wake you." Jack sat gently on the edge of the bed, maintaining a respectful distance. "No apologies needed. Bad dreams are nothing to be ashamed of." Sarah drew her knees to her chest, wrapping thin arms around them. "I keep seeing Grandma Martha in the hospital," she admitted, all alone with nobody to hold her hand. The raw pain in her voice struck Jack deeply. He'd experienced loss, his parents, his marriage, and now potentially his restaurant. But there was something particularly cruel about a child facing such uncertainty. "Come on," he said, standing and offering his hand. "I can't sleep either, now." How about some warm milk? Downstairs in the kitchen, the restaurant took on a different atmosphere at night, quieter, more intimate. Under the soft glow of a single light, Jack warmed milk in a small pot while Sarah sat at the prep table, her recipe book open before her. "This was my birthday present," she said, her fingers gently caressing the pages. "Grandma Martha gave it to me and said we would fill it together." Jack placed a mug of warm milk with a touch of honey and cinnamon before her. "Your grandmother sounds like a special woman." "She is," Sarah replied firmly, refusing to use past tense. "She taught me everything important. How to measure flour without a measuring cup. How to tell if an egg is fresh. How to make people happy with food." "That last one's the hardest to learn," Jack commented, sitting across from her. Sarah nodded, solemnly. "Grandma says cooking isn't about the food, it's about making memories for people to hold on to." She looked up at Jack, her eyes suddenly filled with a fear no child should have to carry. What if she dies alone in that hospital? What if she's calling for me and I'm not there? What if she never teaches me another recipe? The questions tumbled out, revealing the true burden weighing on her young shoulders. Jack put down his mug and reached across the table, gently taking Sarah's small hands in his. "Listen to me," he said with quiet conviction. "You are not alone in this anymore. Tomorrow we're going to start looking for your grandmother. I don't care how many hospitals we have to call or how long it takes. We will find her." Sarah's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Promise?" "I promise," Jack said, meaning it more than he'd meant anything in a long time. "I was making her something special," Sarah confided, turning to a particular page in her notebook. "We were creating our own recipe book together. I was going to surprise her with these new recipes I thought of, but then she got sick." Jack studied the carefully drawn diagrams and notes in the childish handwriting. Despite her age, the concepts showed remarkable understanding of flavor combinations and cooking techniques. "Your grandmother will be incredibly proud when she sees these," he said sincerely. Sarah looked around the quiet kitchen, then back at Jack. Could I maybe try one of these recipes here? When Grandma Martha gets better, I want to show her what I made." The request was simple, yet Jack recognized it for what it was, an act of faith, a refusal to surrender to despair. In this child's mind, creating something new was an affirmation that there would be a future where her grandmother would taste it. "Of course you can," he replied. "This kitchen is open to you." In the soft light of the Thompsons' restaurant kitchen, an unlikely bond formed between a struggling restaurant owner and a homeless child, both clinging to fading dreams, both refusing to let go of the people they loved, both finding unexpected strength in a promise made over warm milk at midnight. Jack Thompson sat at his desk, staring at the piece of paper in his hands. The offer to buy Thompson's restaurant was insultingly low, barely enough to cover half his outstanding debts. Despite everything, he couldn't help but feel a pang of resentment. 15 years of pouring his heart and soul into this place, and this was all it was worth to someone else? The sound of shuffling feet made him look up. Sarah stood in the doorway, her recipe book clutched to her chest as always. She'd been staying at the restaurant for nearly a week now, and Jack had to admit the place felt less empty with her around. "Is that the offer for the restaurant?" she asked, her perceptive eyes taking in his troubled expression. Jack nodded, not bothering to hide the truth. "Not a very good one, I'm afraid. But you're still going to take it?" The disappointment in her voice was palpable. "I might not have a choice, kiddo." Jack sighed, running a hand through his hair. "The bills keep coming, and the customers don't." Sarah stepped fully into the office, her small face unusually determined. "What if we could bring the customers back?" Jack gave her a sad smile. "I've tried everything. New menu items, special discounts, advertising in the local paper, nothing works." "Maybe you haven't tried the right thing yet," Sarah insisted, opening her recipe book. "Grandma Martha always said that when times are tough, you don't abandon traditions, you remind people why they mattered in the first place." Before Jack could respond, Emily appeared in the doorway, her face brightening when she saw them both. "I hope I'm not interrupting," she said. "I brought some clothes for Sarah and wanted to check how everything's going." Sarah turned to Emily, excitement replacing her previous solemnity. "Ms. Carter, we need your help with something important." Emily raised an eyebrow, glancing between the child and Jack. "What kind of help?" "We need to save the restaurant," Sarah declared. "And I have an idea, but we need your music." Jack started to protest, but Sarah continued with unstoppable enthusiasm. "What if we did a special dinner night? Not just regular food, but Grandma Martha's special recipes that I could help make. And Ms. Carter could play piano while people eat." "That's a lovely thought, Sarah, but," Jack began. "People might come for something different." Sarah pressed on. "Grandma always said good food brings people together, especially when there's a story behind it. We could tell them about the recipes and where they came from. And music makes everything feel more special." Emily's eyes lit up. "You know, she might be onto something, Jack. It's not just about the food, it's about creating an experience. Places that are thriving now offer more than meals, they offer memories." Jack looked skeptical. "And you think piano music and old recipes will save this place?" "Not just any recipes," Sarah said earnestly. "These are special. Like this one," she pointed to a page in her book. "Grandma's secret soup that she would only make for special occasions. She said it could warm the coldest heart on the darkest night." Something in the child's unwavering faith tugged at Jack. What did he have to lose? The offer on the table was a dead end anyway. "One night," he conceded finally. "We'll try one special dinner and see what happens." Sarah's face broke into a radiant smile that reminded Jack why people said children could light up rooms. "Thank you," she exclaimed. "You won't regret it. We're going to make people remember why they loved coming here." As Emily and Sarah eagerly began planning, Jack wondered if he was simply delaying the inevitable. Yet watching them, the compassionate teacher and the determined child, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years: hope. Jack stood at the kitchen entrance watching Sarah with growing amazement. For a 10-year-old, her confidence around cooking equipment was remarkable. She moved through the kitchen with the ease of someone who had spent years there, carefully measuring ingredients for what she called Grandma Martha's secret celebration soup. "The key is to toast the spices first," Sarah explained, her small hands expertly shaking a dry pan over low heat. "Grandma says it wakes up the flavors that might be sleeping." Despite his initial skepticism, Jack had agreed to give Sarah a week to prove her culinary talents. Now, 3 days into their preparation for the special dinner night, he was beginning to wonder if Martha Kent had somehow passed down culinary magic through her genes. Emily sat at the prep table, sketching out a simple poster design for their event. "What should we call this dinner?" she asked, tapping her pencil thoughtfully. "Memories on a plate," Sarah suggested immediately. "That's what Grandma Martha always called her best dishes." Jack nodded approvingly. "I like it. Simple but evocative." The three had fallen into an unexpected rhythm of collaboration. Emily had reached out to her network of teachers and parents, promising them a unique dining experience. Jack had contacted a few loyal customers who still occasionally visited. Sarah had been entrusted with designing a small but special menu based on her grandmother's recipes. "We should have a game," Sarah suggested suddenly, stirring her soup base. "Grandma used to play this game where people had to guess the secret ingredient in each dish. If they guessed right, they got an extra dessert." "That's brilliant," Emily exclaimed. "It makes the meal interactive." Jack frowned slightly. "But will people want to play games at dinner?" "Adults forget how to play sometimes," Sarah replied with the simple wisdom of a child. "But they still like to, when someone reminds them." Later, that afternoon, as Emily was leaving, Jack noticed something peculiar. She paused at the door, looking back at Sarah, who was carefully writing recipes on special cards for their guests. The expression on Emily's face was one of such tender concern that Jack felt something stir within him, a feeling long dormant. When Emily caught him watching her, a faint blush colored her cheeks. "She's quite something, isn't she?" she said, softly. Yes, Jack agreed, suddenly aware that he might not be talking only about Sarah. She certainly is. After Emily left, Jack and Sarah continued working side by side, transforming the tired restaurant interior with small touches. Fresh, flowers for each table, handwritten menu cards, candles in mason jars. The simple decorations cost almost nothing but breathed new life into the space. "Do you think people will come?" Sarah asked that evening, her earlier confidence momentarily faltering. Jack looked around at their work, then at the child who had somehow brought purpose back to his failing restaurant. "I think," he said carefully, "that we've created something worth experiencing. And yes, I believe people will come." Sarah nodded, satisfied with his answer. Grandma Martha always said that when you cook with love, the right people find their way to your table. As Jack turned off the kitchen lights that night, he realized something had shifted in him. Whether this dinner succeeded or failed financially, Sarah had already accomplished something remarkable. She had reminded him why he became a chef in the first place. Not to make money, but to create moments of joy through food. The special dinner was only 3 days away, and against all odds, Jack Thompson found himself looking forward to it with genuine excitement. The restaurant buzzed with activity as final preparations for their special dinner night took shape. 3 days of intense work had transformed Thompson's. Though the changes were modest, fresh flowers on each table, hand-lettered menus, and strings of warm lights creating a cozy ambiance, the space felt renewed with purpose. Jack stood in the doorway between the dining room and kitchen, watching as Emily carefully tuned the old upright piano in the corner. Her fingers moved expertly across the keys, making minor adjustments with a tuning wrench. He found himself captivated by the gentle concentration on her face, the way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the slight smile that appeared. When a note rang true, Emily glanced up, catching his gaze. For a moment they simply looked at each other across the room, something unspoken passing between them. Then Sarah's voice broke the spell. "Mr. Thompson, could you taste this sauce? I think it needs something, but I can't figure out what." Jack turned toward the kitchen, trying to ignore the unfamiliar warmth in his chest. "Coming, chef?" he called back, the playful title having become their small joke over the past few days. In the kitchen, Sarah stood on a step stool, carefully stirring a copper pot. Her forehead creased in concentration. She looked every bit the serious culinarian despite her small stature and the apron tied twice around her waist. Jack accepted the offered spoon, tasting the rich brown sauce with the critical palate of a professional. "Acid," he concluded. "It needs brightness. Try a touch of sherry vinegar." Sarah's eyes lit up. "Yes, that's exactly what Grandma would say. She always told me to look for balance. Sweet, salty, sour, bitter." As Jack reached for the vinegar on a high shelf, he studied the girl who had somehow inserted herself so completely into his life in just a short time. Her culinary intuition was remarkable, especially for someone so young. What struck him most, however, was her resilience. Despite everything she'd endured, her passion remained undimmed. "You're going to be quite the chef someday," he said, handing her the vinegar. Sarah beamed at the compliment, carefully adding a few drops to her sauce. "Grandma says cooking is like painting with flavors. You have to know which colors work together." From the dining room, piano music suddenly filled the air, Emily testing the instrument with a gentle, flowing melody. Sarah paused her stirring, listening with evident delight. "Ms. Carter plays beautifully," she observed. "It makes the food taste better already." Jack nodded, finding himself drawn back to the doorway. Emily was lost in the music, her expression serene as her fingers danced across the keys. The melody was something classical that Jack couldn't name but found inexplicably moving. Sarah appeared beside him, watching Emily with equal appreciation. After a moment, the perceptive child looked up at Jack, then back at Emily, a knowing smile spreading across her face. "You like Miss Carter," she stated simply. Jack felt a flush creep up his neck. "She's been very kind to help us with this dinner." Sarah rolled her eyes with the exasperation only a child could master. "That's not what I mean. You like her. the way people like each other in movies. Before Jack could formulate a defense, Sarah continued matter-of-factly, "It's okay. She likes you too, I can tell." "How could you possibly know that?" Jack asked, equal parts embarrassed and curious. "By the way she looks at you when you're busy doing something else," Sarah replied sagely. "Grandma Martha says that's how you—" "No, it's real. When they watch you even when they think no one's watching them." Jack opened his mouth to respond but was saved by Emily concluding her impromptu performance. She looked up, catching sight of her small audience. "How does it sound?" she called. "Perfect," Jack and Sarah answered in unison. Emily rose from the bench. "Sarah, would you like to try something? I remember you mentioned you sing in school choir." The girl hesitated, suddenly shy. "I'm not very good." "Nonsense," Emily encouraged. "Music, like cooking, is about joy, not perfection." With gentle, coaxing, Sarah approached the piano. Emily played a few introductory notes, and to Jack's surprise, the child began to sing. A simple folk melody about home and hearth that Martha had apparently taught her. As the pure, clear voice filled the restaurant, Jack felt something crack within him. A wall he'd built around himself crumbling just a little. In the golden afternoon light watching this impromptu performance, he could almost believe they were something like a family. The thought both terrified and comforted him, in equal measure. The evening of their special dinner arrived with a nervous energy hanging in the air. Jack straightened his collar for the third time, peering anxiously through the kitchen doors at the empty dining room. It was 15 minutes until opening, and despite Emily's assurances that people would come, doubt gnawed at him. Sarah, standing on her step stool at the prep station, seemed to sense his unease. "Grandma Martha says the best meals happen when you cook like everyone's already arrived and having a wonderful time." Jack smiled despite himself. "Your grandmother is a wise woman." "The soup is perfect," Sarah declared, giving the large pot a final stir. "Remember, it's our secret weapon." The child's unwavering confidence was contagious. Over the past week, Jack had watched in amazement as Sarah's culinary instincts guided them through creating a simple but special menu. Each dish contained what she called a happiness ingredient, some unexpected element that elevated the familiar to something memorable. The bell above the door jingled, and Jack's heart leapt. Emily entered, wearing a simple but elegant dress, carrying a small vase of fresh flowers. "These are for the piano," she explained, placing them atop the instrument. "Every performance needs flowers." Before Jack could respond, the door opened again. An elderly couple, Mr. and Mrs. Davidson, longtime supporters of the restaurant, entered hesitantly. "We got your call, Jack," Mr. Davidson said, looking around at the transformed space. "Thought we'd come early and support whatever new venture you're trying." Jack welcomed them warmly, showing them to the best table by the window. As they settled in, Sarah emerged from the kitchen, carrying 2 small cups. "Welcome to our special night," she said with surprising poise. "This is a greeting taste of Grandma Martha's celebration soup. There's a secret ingredient, and if you guess it, you get an extra dessert." The Davidsons exchanged amused glances before accepting the offering. Mrs. Davidson took a tentative sip, then her eyes widened in surprise. "This is remarkable," she said, taking another spoonful. "There's something familiar but unexpected, is it? Orange blossom?" Sarah's delighted laugh brightened the room. "Close. It's Meyer lemon zest and a tiny touch of lavender. Grandma Martha says it reminds people of spring mornings." As if the Davidsons had broken an invisible barrier, more guests began to arrive. Emily's teacher colleagues, a few curious neighbors, even the local newspaper food columnist who had heard whispers of something special happening at Thompson's. Soon, every table was filled. Emily began playing softly at the piano, creating an atmosphere of warmth and nostalgia. Jack moved between kitchen and dining room, explaining each dish as it was served, sharing stories of its origin that Sarah had carefully coached him on. "This roast," he told a captivated table, "has a glaze based on a recipe that Sarah's grandmother created for a governor's dinner 30 years ago. The secret is black garlic and local honey." Throughout the evening, Sarah remained primarily in the kitchen, too shy for full dining room interactions but occasionally peeking out to see people's reactions to her food. Her face glowed with pride each time a clean plate returned or when she heard appreciative murmurs from the guests. By dessert, a deceptively simple apple tart with rosemary-infused caramel, a transformation had occurred. The restaurant hummed with conversation and laughter. Several guests asked if these special dinners would become regular events. The food columnist was taking extensive notes. As the evening wound down and satisfied customers departed with warm goodbyes, the three architects of the evening gathered in the kitchen. "We actually made a profit," Jack announced, counting the night's receipts with amazement. "Not enough to save the restaurant long term, but enough to do this again." "People want to come back," Emily added. "Several of my colleagues already asked about next week." Sarah, exhausted but radiant, sat on her stepstool, clutching her recipe book. "Grandma Martha would be so proud," she whispered. "We made people happy with food tonight." Jack looked at the child who had somehow brought his dying restaurant back to life, if only for one evening. Then he glanced at Emily, whose gentle support had made it all possible. For the first time in years, Jack Thompson allowed himself to believe that perhaps, just perhaps, some things lost could be found again. Word about the special dinner at Thompson's spread quickly through Springfield. What had begun as a desperate attempt to salvage something from a failing business had unexpectedly captured the town's imagination. The morning after their first successful event, Jack arrived at the restaurant to find 3 voicemail messages from people asking about reservations for the next dinner. "People are talking about us," he told Sarah and Emily over breakfast. "The question is, how do we keep this momentum going? One good night isn't enough to save the restaurant." Sarah closed her recipe book thoughtfully. "We need something even more special next time, something that makes people curious." Emily nodded in agreement. "In music, we call it theme and variations. You establish something familiar, then surprise the audience with unexpected twists." Sarah's eyes lit up. "That's it. What if we don't tell people exactly what they're getting?" Grandma Martha used to do this thing called Chef's Trust, where people wouldn't order specific dishes. They'd just tell her what they liked and didn't like, and she'd surprise them. Jack frowned, calculations running through his head. "That's risky. We'd need different ingredients, more preparation time. The food costs could be much higher if we're not careful. But the experience would be unique," Emily countered. "No other restaurant in Springfield offers anything like that." Jack watched as Sarah hurriedly flipped through her recipe book, her excitement palpable. "Look," she said, pointing to various pages. "We can create variations on simple ingredients, like this potato dish. 3 different ways to prepare the same potato, each one with a different story about places Grandma traveled." Despite his reservations, Jack found himself drawn to Sarah's enthusiasm. "Show me what you're thinking." Over the next hour, Sarah outlined her vision. A menu of mysteries where diners would receive a series of small courses, each with a story attached and a secret ingredient to guess. The ingredients themselves would be relatively inexpensive, but the preparations would transform them into something special. "The beauty is that we can use what's seasonal and affordable," Sarah explained with wisdom beyond her years. "Grandma always said the best chefs work with what's available, not what's expensive." Emily, watching from the sideline, added her own suggestion. "I could adjust the music to complement each course, different melodies that hint at the origin of each dish." By lunchtime, Jack had surrendered to their combined creativity. "All right, we'll try it, but we'll need to be smart about our inventory and preparation. No exotic ingredients we can't source locally." They spent the afternoon creating a framework for what Sarah proudly dubbed Martha's Mystery Menu. Jack was continually astonished by the child's culinary knowledge. She understood flavor profiles that some professional chefs took years to master. When he mentioned this, Sarah simply shrugged. "Grandma made it into a game. We'd go to the farmer's market, and she'd have me close my eyes and taste things. Then guess what would pair well with them? She said my taste buds were special." As they worked, Jack noticed something remarkable happening. The weight of potential bankruptcy that had been crushing him for months felt lighter. Whether or not this new approach saved the restaurant, the joy of creative cooking had returned. something he hadn't realized was missing until Sarah brought it back. That evening, after Emily left, Jack watched Sarah carefully organizing the spice shelf according to her grandmother's system. Sweet to savory, bright to deep, she explained, standing on her tiptoes to reach the higher shelves. You know, Jack said casually, your grandmother would be very proud of what you're doing. Here, Sarah paused, her small face growing serious. Do you think we'll find her soon? I want her to see what we've created. We're making progress, Jack assured her. Emily's contact at the hospital administration office is checking the database of all hospitals in a 50-mile radius. It's just a matter of time. Sarah nodded, accepting his answer with the peculiar mix of childlike hope and adult pragmatism that characterized her. Then we better make this place amazing before she gets here. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of preparation. Jack contacted local farmers for seasonal produce. Emily designed simple but elegant invitations for their next dinner. Sarah tested combinations of flavors, making meticulous notes in her recipe book. Word continued to spread. The local newspaper ran a small feature about the Renaissance at Thompson's, highlighting the mysterious new direction and the unusual collaboration between the veteran restaurateur and his young culinary consultant. The reporter had thoughtfully kept Sarah's full situation private, describing her only as a gifted young chef in training. By Friday morning, they had a waiting list for Saturday's dinner. The excitement was tempered only by the knowledge that, even with 2 successful nights, the restaurant's long-term future remained uncertain. The monthly rent was due in 2 weeks, and suppliers were still calling about overdue bills. One step at a time, Jack reminded himself as he reviewed their preparations. This unexpected chapter in his restaurant's story, and in his life, had taught him that sometimes the most extraordinary opportunities arrived in the most ordinary packages. And watching Sarah conduct her final taste tests in the kitchen, her face alight with creative purpose, Jack realized something else. Regardless of what happened to Thompson's restaurant, his life had been immeasurably enriched by a homeless 10-year-old with a tattered recipe book and an indomitable spirit. The Saturday evening service was in full swing, Thompson's restaurant buzzing with energy unlike anything it had seen in years. Every table was filled with guests eagerly anticipating each mysterious course of Martha's mystery menu. Emily's gentle piano melodies floated through the dining room, perfectly complementing the intimate atmosphere they had created. Jack moved between tables with renewed confidence, describing each dish with the passion that had once defined his approach to cooking. The guests responded enthusiastically, participating in the guessing game of secret ingredients and sharing their own food memories sparked by Sarah's creations. In the kitchen, Jack had enlisted 2 former employees who had heard about the restaurant's revival and offered to help for the evening. They handled the basic preparation, allowing Jack to focus on final touches and presentation. But the true heart of the kitchen remained Sarah, whose intuitive understanding of flavors guided each plate. The dinner had progressed beautifully through 5 courses, with the main entree, now being served, a deceptively simple-looking braised beef dish that concealed layers of complex flavors. As Jack finished his explanation to the last table, he turned toward the kitchen intending to check on dessert preparations. What he saw stopped him in his tracks. Through the kitchen door's window, Jack observed a scene that defied everything he thought he understood about his young houseguest. Sarah stood on her step stool, not simply helping but commanding the kitchen with authority and precision that would impress veteran chefs. 15 seconds more on that reduction, then pull it off the heat, she directed one of the helpers. Watch for the bubbles to change size. That's how you know it's ready. To another assistant, she demonstrated a plating technique, her small hands moving with confident efficiency. 3 dots of the sauce, then drag through with the back of a spoon. Just like this. Grandma Martha says it creates a path for the eye to follow across the plate. Her posture, her terminology, her understanding of timing and temperature. These weren't things a child her age should know, even one raised by a professional chef. This was muscle memory, developed through countless hours of practice. Jack pushed. Through the door, his presence immediately noticed by Sarah, who looked up with a bright smile. "Mr. Thompson, is everyone enjoying the beef? I was worried the star anise might be too strong, but Grandma always said it's what makes people take a second bite and wonder why." "Sarah," Jack said carefully, "where did you learn to expedite a soy kitchen like that?" The girl looked confused. "Like what?" "Like a head chef with years of experience," Jack clarified, watching her closely. "The way you're directing everyone, your understanding of timing, the technical terms you're using, these aren't things you pick up just by watching." Sarah glanced down, suddenly self-conscious. "Grandma didn't just teach me recipes. From when I was little, she'd put me on a stool next to her in the kitchen at Bellini's. The other chefs would let me help when the owner wasn't around. They called me Little Chef. I thought everyone cooked like this." One of the helpers chuckled. "Boss, this kid knew the exact moment to pull my sauce without even looking at it." She heard the sound change from across the kitchen. Jack stood speechless, reassessing everything he thought he knew about Sarah. She wasn't simply a child with a good palate. She was a culinary prodigy with training that most aspiring chefs would envy. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked gently. Sarah shrugged, her expression mixture of pride and uncertainty. "I didn't think it was special. Grandma Martha always said cooking is just paying attention with all your senses." After a pause, she added with childlike honesty, "And maybe I was afraid. You wouldn't let me help if you knew I was just a kid." Jack looked at the girl who had transformed his failing restaurant, who had brought joy back to his kitchen, who had somehow managed to survive on the streets while carrying within her an extraordinary gift. "Sarah," he said, kneeling to meet her eyes, "what you can do isn't just special, it's remarkable. And age has nothing to do with talent. Your grandmother didn't just teach you recipes, she trained you to be a chef." The recognition in Jack's voice brought a smile to Sarah's face that illuminated the entire kitchen. For the first time since meeting her, Jack saw not just a vulnerable child in need, but a young culinary artist coming into her own. The moment was interrupted by the kitchen timer's insistent beep. Without missing a beat, Sarah returned to her role. "That's the dessert soufflés. They wait for no one, not even revelations." The Tuesday after their second successful dinner service, Jack was calculating their growing yet still insufficient profits when the bell above the door announced a visitor. Looking up, he immediately recognized Martin Geller, the real estate developer who had previously made the insultingly low offer for Thompson's. This time, however, Geller wasn't alone. A well-dressed woman accompanied him, her discerning eyes surveying the restaurant's modest improvements. "Jack, good to see you," Geller boomed with newfound enthusiasm. "This is Diane Winters, my business partner. We heard some interesting things about your revival." Jack rose slowly, his guard immediately up. "Martin, Ms. Winters, what can I do for you?" Geller's smile broadened as he pulled out a chair without waiting for an invitation. "We were at the Baldwins' dinner party last night, and they couldn't stop raving about some mystery menu they experienced here. Apparently, you've been holding out on us, Jack. A hidden culinary gem right under our noses." "We've made a few changes," Jack replied cautiously. Diane Winters opened her leather portfolio. "Mr. Thompson, we're prepared to revise our offer significantly. We believe your concept has tremendous potential in the right hands, with proper marketing and expansion." She slid a document across the table. Jack glanced down, his eyes widening at the figure. Nearly triple the previous offer. It would more than cover his debts, with enough left over for a comfortable new start. "We're not just interested in the property anymore," Geller continued. "We want the concept, the recipes, the whole package. Martha's mystery menu has franchise potential written all over it." Jack stared at the offer, conflicting emotions surging through him. Just 2 weeks ago, he would have accepted without hesitation. Now, the kitchen door swung open and Sarah bounded out, her face alight with excitement. "Mr. Thompson, I just figured out how to make that coffee foam without using the machine. Grandma Martha always said simplicity beats technology," and she stopped abruptly, noticing the visitors. "Well, hello there," Geller said, his businessman's instincts immediately recognizing an opportunity. You must be the famous little chef everyone's talking about. Sarah looked questioningly at Jack, who introduced her with careful neutrality. This is Sarah. She's been helping in the kitchen. Helping? Diane's perfectly shaped eyebrow arched. From what we've heard, she's the secret ingredient to your success. Before Jack could respond, his phone rang. Glancing at the screen, he recognized Emily's number and excused himself to answer. Sarah remained in the dining room, uncomfortably shifting under the appraising gazes of the visitors. Emily? What's up? Jack asked, stepping into the hallway. Her voice came through breathless with excitement. Jack, we found her. My contact. At the hospital administration located Martha Kent. She's at Memorial General about 40 miles from here. She's been asking for Sarah. Jack's heart leapt. How is she? Can we see her? She's stable, still recovering, but much improved. They said visitors would be welcome, especially Sarah. Jack ended the call and hurried back to the dining room, momentarily forgetting about the potential buyers. His eyes found Sarah immediately. That was Emily, he said, his voice gentle with emotion. She found your grandmother. Sarah's reaction was everything, her small body freezing in disbelief, then trembling as the news registered. Grandma Martha, you found her? Is she okay? She's getting better, Jack assured her, kneeling to her level. And she's been asking for you. Tears welled in Sarah's eyes as she launched herself into Jack's arms with a sob of relief. After everything, the homelessness, the uncertainty, the fear, this moment of pure joy overshadowed all else. Only then did Jack remember their visitors. He turned to find both Geller and Diane watching the scene with visible discomfort, their polished business personas temporarily displaced by the raw emotion before them. I'm sorry, Jack said, rising with Sarah still clinging to him. This is rather important news. Perhaps we could reschedule. Geller cleared his throat. Of course. The offer stands. Take some time to consider it. He placed his business card on the table. Call us when you're ready to discuss terms. As they departed, Jack barely registered their goodbye. His focus remained entirely on Sarah, whose tears had transformed into a radiant smile. When can we go see her? She asked, wiping her eyes. Can we go right now? As soon as Emily gets here, Jack promised. She's already on her way. In the whirlwind of preparation that followed, Emily arriving, Sarah gathering her precious recipe book to show her grandmother, Jack closing the restaurant for the day, the substantial offer lying on the table was temporarily forgotten. It was only as they drove toward Memorial General, with Sarah chattering excitedly in the back seat about all she wanted to tell her grandmother, that Jack caught Emily's questioning glance. What? He asked quietly. Emily nodded toward her purse, where she had tucked the buyer's offer for safekeeping. That's a lot of money, Jack. It is, he agreed, his eyes meeting hers briefly before returning to the road. The unspoken question hung between them. After finding Sarah's grandmother, what would happen to their unexpected little family? And what would become of Thompson's restaurant, the failing business that had somehow found new life through a child's belief in the power of food to bring people together? The halls of Memorial General Hospital seemed endless as Jack, Emily, and Sarah made their way to the rehabilitation wing. Sarah clutched her recipe book with white knuckles, a mixture of excitement and anxiety evident in her quick, small steps. Jack had never seen her so quiet. The normally chatty child lost in her own thoughts as they approached the moment she had dreamed of for weeks. Room 412, Emily announced softly, checking the information at the nurse's station. Just down this hall. Sarah hesitated, suddenly uncertain. What if she looks different? What if she doesn't recognize me? Jack knelt beside her, gently placing his hands on her shoulders. She's your grandmother, Sarah. No illness can change that bond. With a reassuring nod from Emily, Sarah took a deep breath and led the way to room 412. The door was partially open, and through the gap they could see an elderly woman sitting in a chair by the window. Though clearly diminished by her illness, thinner and more fragile than the vibrant chef Sarah had described, Martha Kent maintained an unmistakable dignity in her posture. Sarah froze in the doorway, overcome by emotion at the sight of her. grandmother after so many weeks of separation. It was Jack's gentle hand on her back that finally propelled her forward. "Grandma," she whispered. Martha turned, her tired eyes instantly illuminating with recognition and joy. "Sarah, my darling girl." The child flew across the room and into her grandmother's waiting arms. They clung to each other, both weeping without restraint or embarrassment. Jack and Emily stood in the doorway, reluctant to intrude on such a profound reunion. "I've been so worried," Martha said, stroking Sarah's hair. "When they moved me here for specialized treatment, I had no way to tell you. Are you all right? Where have you been staying?" Sarah pulled back just enough to meet her grandmother's eyes. "I've been at a restaurant, Grandma. A real restaurant with a big kitchen where I've been cooking your recipes." Martha looked past Sarah to the two adults in the doorway, questions in her gaze. Emily stepped forward, introducing herself and explaining how she had found Sarah and connected her with Jack. "You've been taking care of my granddaughter?" Martha asked Jack, gratitude and wonder in her voice. "To be honest, I think she's been taking care of me," Jack replied with a warm smile. "Your granddaughter has quite the culinary gift, Mrs. Kent." "Martha, please," she insisted, keeping an arm firmly around Sarah as if afraid the child might disappear again. Sarah eagerly opened her recipe book, showing her grandmother the new entries, the variations she had created, the notes on guest reactions. "We made a special menu, Grandma. We called it Martha's Mystery Menu after you, and people had to guess the secret ingredients just like you taught me." Martha's eyes filled with tears again as she examined the book, recognizing her own culinary legacy carried forward through her granddaughter's hands. "You didn't just keep these recipes safe," she whispered. "You gave them life, Sarah. You made them your own." Jack explained how Sarah had transformed his failing restaurant, bringing back customers and reigniting his passion for cooking. As he described their special dinner nights, he noticed Martha studying him intently. "Thompson's restaurant," she said thoughtfully. "I remember that place from years ago. Your father had quite the touch with pastry, as I recall." Jack was startled. "You knew my father?" Martha smiled. Springfield's culinary world was small back then. "We competed in the same circles, but always with respect." Her expression grew serious. "And now you've taken in my Sarah when she needed help most. I can never repay that kindness." The conversation was interrupted by a nurse arriving with Martha's medication. As she administered it, Martha asked casually, "So what are your plans for the restaurant now, Mr. Thompson? Sarah makes it sound like you've found a winning formula." Jack hesitated, exchanging a glance with Emily. The buyer's offer weighed heavily on his mind, but this hardly seemed the time to discuss it. Martha, however, was no fool. She had spent a lifetime reading people across a kitchen pass. "Ah," she said knowingly. "Someone's made you an offer, haven't they, for the restaurant and the concept?" 6 months had passed since that fateful evening when a homeless 10-year-old girl had first stepped through the doors of Thompson's restaurant. The same doors now displayed a brand new sign, Martha and Sarah's, in elegant hand-painted letters. The line of customers waiting for tables stretched halfway down the block, a common sight these days. Inside, the restaurant hummed with life. The decor remained deliberately simple but warm. Family photographs mixed with framed recipe cards on the walls, fresh flowers on every table, and the soft glow of vintage pendant lights casting a golden ambiance throughout the space. In the kitchen, a remarkable transformation had taken place. New equipment shared space with lovingly maintained classics. The staff had doubled, yet the heart of the operation remained the same. Sarah and her grandmother Martha, working side by side at the central prep station. Martha, now fully recovered and vibrant again, supervised her granddaughter's technique as Sarah expertly plated their signature dessert. Though still a child in many ways, Sarah moved with the confidence of someone born to this craft, her small hands precise and steady. "Easy with that sauce, dear," Martha advised gently. "Remember what we always say. The last touch should be the lightest." Sarah finished with a grin. "I remember, Grandma." Jack watched this exchange from the past, marveling at how fate had intervened in all their lives. That day at the hospital 6 months ago had changed everything. When Martha had learned of the buyer's offer, she had surprised everyone with her counter-proposal. "Why sell something you've rebuilt with such love?" she had asked, her businessman's mind still sharp despite her illness. "My medical treatments are covered by insurance now that they've sorted out the paperwork mess. Once I'm discharged, I'll need somewhere to live with Sarah and work. Why not combine our talents instead?" Of walking away, the partnership had been Martha's idea. With her culinary reputation still respected in Springfield and her decades of restaurant knowledge, combined with Jack's established business and Sarah's undeniable talent, Martha and Sarah's had quickly become the most talked-about dining establishment in the region. The door from the dining room swung open as Emily entered, carrying her music sheets. She had officially joined the restaurant team 3 months ago, leaving her teaching position to become their full-time music director and, as of last month, Jack's fiancée. "Full house again tonight," she announced, pausing to drop a kiss on Jack's cheek. "The culinary memories theme is a hit. People are sharing stories about their own family recipes at their tables." This was their newest innovation, themed nights, where each course was paired not just with music, but with the story behind its creation. Guests were encouraged to participate, creating an interactive dining experience unlike anything else in the city. Martha nodded approvingly. "Food has always been about more than sustenance. It's about connection, history, love. We're just giving people permission to celebrate that." The restaurant's success had allowed them to expand their mission beyond serving paying customers. Every Monday when the restaurant was officially closed, they opened their doors to homeless families and individuals for a free community meal. Jack's way of honoring how their journey together had begun. The book publisher called again, Emily mentioned to Martha. "They're very excited about your manuscript." Martha smiled, glancing at the thick binder near her station where she and Sarah had been documenting their culinary journey. From sidewalk to soufflé, a grandmother and granddaughter's culinary journey was already generating buzz in the publishing world, with a portion of proceeds designated for homeless family services. Sarah finished her plating and stepped back to admire her work. "Perfect," Jack declared, giving her a thumbs up before delivering the desserts to their waiting guests. Later that evening, as the final customers departed with satisfied smiles, the 4 of them gathered around a table in the empty dining room. Jack uncorked a bottle of sparkling cider, champagne for the adults, cider for Sarah, and raised his glass. "To second chances," he toasted, "and to the little girl who reminded me why I became a chef in the first place." "To family," Emily added, her eyes shining with love as she looked around the table, "found in the most unexpected places." "To traditions," Martha contributed, "old ones honored, new ones created." Sarah, her young face solemn with the importance of the moment, raised her glass last. "To food that tells our stories and brings us together. Grandma Martha always said a good meal can change a life." She smiled at Jack. I guess she was right. As they clinked glasses in the warm glow of the restaurant that had become their shared home, each reflected silently on the remarkable journey that had brought them together. The child who had once waited alone on a sidewalk, the restaurant owner who had nearly lost everything, the teacher who had followed her heart, and the grandmother whose culinary wisdom had sparked it all, each had found not just security, but purpose and joy. Outside the windows of Martha and Sarah's, Springfield continued its evening rhythm, unaware that one of its greatest success stories had begun with a simple act of kindness toward a homeless child with a tattered recipe book and an extraordinary gift, the end.